Hello, my name is Kerry Arthur, and today we are going to talk about, well, we're going to ask a question, I guess. Ask and answer a question. Just how stupid is Warhammer 40k? Just how stupid is it? How silly is it? How completely daft and not worthy of respect is the Warhammer 40k universe? And this is basically because last week we talked about the fact that there's going to be Warhammer Horror, which still sounds like an awesome idea, and I'm determined to get through as much of it as I possibly can. Maybe it might toughen me up, I don't know. But there was a comment in response to that I found on Reddit, where someone was just like, horror would not work for Warhammer 40k because it's too stupid. It is a silly universe, it is not set up for horror at all. And they used the example, the description of how can you have something horror based in a universe where magic, like werewolf Vikings, fight green football hooligans driving around in Mad Max cars. And that was their example of 40k being too silly for horror, being too stupid, which I quite liked in a way, because I have used such terms to describe Warhammer 40k myself. It can be a very silly universe if you want it to be. It can also be an incredibly dark and gruesome and brutal universe. And really what it comes down to is your descriptors. It's the way that you decide to describe it. If you say, magic, space wolf, like werewolf, I keep wanting to say vampires, but that's Blood Angels, Vikings fighting football hooligans driving around in Mad Max cars, that does make 40k sound pretty stupid. It does, undeniably. That sounds kind of daft. I mean, it sounds awesome as well, but it sounds pretty silly. The thing is that you can describe anything in that manner and it will sound silly. No matter what you're talking about, you can make anything sound stupid. That doesn't necessarily mean that the setting itself is stupid. That doesn't necessarily mean that events in that setting have to be stupid. I mean, the example for... Let's take a real world example. Let's say you get in your car and you need to go and buy petrol. Simple, easy. If you describe it as, I need to go and get petrol, the car is low on petrol, then no one is going to sit there and go, that's just fucking stupid. That doesn't make any sense. It's dumb, that's silly. What a silly thing to say. If you say, I'm going to get in my metal and glass box powered by explosions, and I'm going to roll to a canopy that dispenses the explosion fuel required for said explosions to power my metal and glass box, you will of course sound like a fucking idiot. You will sound stupid, you will sound silly. The thing that you're describing sounds silly even though it's a completely normal everyday activity. That is something that everybody does. It is not a stupid and silly act in and of itself. But if you describe it like it is, then guess what? It sounds like it is. Which is exactly what I saw from this person who was like, horror wouldn't work in 40k, it's too stupid. I'm one of those people who is of the opinion that the whole grimdark thing at times goes a little too far. As in, there seems to be a kind of, I'd say a vocal minority who seem to think that 40k has to be nothing but dark. It has to be nothing but the absolute worst of humanity, the worst of everything. You get up, at 2 years old, you get up, you slave away in the manufactorium, and then you're dead by the age of 3 because an alien has penetrated your eye socket with a sword made out of demons. There seems to be a kind of an underlying group of people that think, that's how it has to be all the way across the Imperium. There's no silliness in 40k. It can't be silly. It's too grim and it's too dark. It's extremely excessive, Warhammer 40,000. It's intentionally over the top. It's intentionally, everything is turned up to 11. The idea of elite warriors is turned up to 11 and beyond with the Space Marines, let's be honest, because the Space Marines, whilst they are the elite warriors of the Imperium, of humanity, there are also elite Space Marines within the Space Marines, which are the elite ones. There is now an entire new breed of Space Marines that are technically better than the previous Space Marines, that have their own elites within elites, who are the better ones of the elite. It's completely exaggerated. But it doesn't necessarily have to be described as exaggerated every single time. It doesn't need to be classed as exaggerated every single time. And it also doesn't need to be completely dark every single time. The thing with 40k is that I think it actually has a greater balance than people are prepared to give it credit for. And this applies not just to people outside the hobby, but inside the hobby as well. It's very easy to read, like, say, the Horus Heresy, and get from that, essentially, that humanity is, in some way, always doomed. There is always something going to go wrong. No matter how hard humanity tries, the rest of the galaxy is just out to fuck them up, and that is how things are. And that would be an accurate message to take away from it. But there's also so many other smaller stories within that that tell the tale of humanity's resilience, tell the tale of humanity's hope, the fact that, despite the fact that there is, literal armies of demons hunting you down, it is still possible to have moments of friendship, of brotherhood. It's kind of weird in that there are two extremes, I think, for not a lot of people, but a significant number of people. There are two extremes of 40k is just a parody, it's just stupid, it's only over the top, nothing in it can be taken seriously. Then there's also the kind of the crew of it's all dark, it's all grim, there is no hope, there is absolutely nothing you can do. This is how the universe is. You will die horribly at some point. There is no alternative. Both of those views completely do a disservice to the actual setting itself. They completely do a disservice to the quality of the books surrounding Warhammer 40,000. I mean, the Horus Heresy is, 52 books long now, or something stupid? And you cannot take all of that writing, all of that lore, all of those stories, and boil it down to the space Vikings are fighting against the spies. Like, you can't boil it down to that, because that's completely reductive and ignores all of the actual very human tales that happen in between. It's the same thing with, I guess, reducing the Primarchs. It's kind of easy to take the one kind of standout factor of the different Primarchs and kind of give the impression that that is all of their character. That is all that they are, that is all that they do. But for the most part, the Primarchs are incredibly fleshed out characters. And for the most part, they've been fleshed out very well, to the point where, for, demigods, effectively, they are incredibly relatable. I mean, especially, for my money, the traitor Primarchs I find a lot more interesting in general. Angron's story, and Lorgar's story, and Magnus' story are three of my favourites. They are my top three for traitor Primarchs at the very least, and to reduce their character and their legions and their parts to just, it's just a Viking in space, kind of misses a huge chunk of what makes 40k good. It could be said to be too silly for horror. It could be said to be too dark, for instance, for a kid's adventure book. But for either of those things to exist, you have to have some sort of middle ground. There has to be some sort of crossover, or it would all be stupid, or it would all be terrible. If something is all stupid, unremittingly silly, there is no moment of intensity or drama or terror or anything like that, that's going to get boring very, very quickly. Even the most silly of TV shows, of films, have to have moments that elevate them above just sitting there going, oh, this is so dumb. It's the same thing with I would say horror. I'm not a huge horror fan, but there's still moments of levity. There has to be, to remind you that the people involved are human. 40k is absolutely no different to any other franchise in that respect, but it seems to garner a lot more dislike because of its two extremes, because it can be reduced down to sparkly vampires in space, blood angels, or alternatively it can be reduced down to demons will invade your home and murder you before you turn the age of 10, and that's going to happen to everybody. Of course, neither of those two extremes are actually true. The truth is completely in the middle. The truth is completely balanced. For every story of something like, for every like hilariously over-the-top story, like Tusker Demon Killer, the orc that went into the Eye of Terror and is now resurrected every day on a planet of corn so he can fight demons, essentially going to paradise. That's daft, that's silly, that's over the top. There are stories of, well, if you look at, here's the thing, it's not Cyrene, it's Sirene, I'm pretty sure. It even says in the book, I can't remember which book it is now, one of the two, where she is a featured character for the Word Bearers. There's also the illusion that when she was dead, allusion, not illusion, that when she was dead before she was resurrected by Erebus, she experienced everything. She knows exactly what was happening to her soul in the warp in the time that she was deceased. She remembers all of it. It was not peaceful, it was not dark, it was nightmarish and horrendous. Those both exist in the same universe. There is space for both in the same universe. One is like existential terror, the other is the incredibly silly tale of an orc getting to murder things over and over again, which is the best thing that can happen to orcs. Do you see what I mean? You can pick and choose, but you don't need to pick and choose. You can decide on which element might be your favourite, but that doesn't prevent the other elements from existing, and the universe is at its absolute best when it's a mix of the two. So when you see things like Warhammer Horror, oh, it's just too silly. Well, no, it's not, because you can choose to make it that silly, or you can choose to make it much more than that, because it is much more than that. And I will say that actually the Warhammer Horror thing has genuinely kind of, I guess, softened my ideas of the Warhammer Adventure stuff, the stuff for, aimed at kids. Because when I was looking at Warhammer Horror, it was like, it's perfect for that. But there is that element of just not that serious stuff going on as well that could be adapted for something else. It's a mix of both, and that's what makes it so good. That's what makes it so interesting. If it was unremitting, unrelenting horror and nothing else, it would get boring and annoying. If it was just unremitting, unrelenting silliness, it would get boring and annoying. But it doesn't, because it is a fairly well, given how just over the top and ridiculous it is, it's a very good mix of the two, and that's what gives it its charm, that's what gives it its longevity, that's what makes it such an entertaining setting, and an extension to that, entertaining hobby to be part of. So just how stupid is Warhammer 40k? It's as little or as stupid as you want to make it. It is literally down to you as the person reading the material to decide what you take away from it. That was longer than I meant it to be, but never mind. Do you reckon it's too daft? Do you reckon it is serious enough? Do you reckon it's not serious enough? Do you think it should be more grim, more dark, or do you think you need that humour and those kind of moments of lightness to make the rest of it work? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click the videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. It is melting me. I'm dying in this room. Oh my god, it's so hot. Bye bye.